Welcome to Armchair Expat, the podcast meant to get you out of your lazy boy and into your new life abroad. I'm Shannon Acton, founder of Bargain Homes Abroad, and I'm riding shotgun as we chase the dream of life beyond borders. Each episode, we'll hear stories from people who've left their comfort zone to explore the world. They'll share their highs, their lows, and their in-betweens, all meant to lovingly light a fire under your bum, so you can stop dreaming about it and start living it. So if you're stuck in your comfy recliner, scrolling through dreamy destinations, wondering what if, it's time to swap that raggedy old armchair for a one-way ticket. Let's freaking go, people. Do you dream of trading your 9-to-5 grind for ocean breezes and lazy afternoons? Yeah, me too. I know. Today I'm joined by Dawn and Matt, better known as the Unretirees, a dynamic duo who swapped their busy U.S. lives for sun-soaked adventure in Portugal's Silver Coast. In this episode, we're diving into how they made the leap abroad, why Portugal won their hearts, the real cost of living, and how they're helping others turn midlife expertise into location freedom. Whether you're plotting your own someday move or just curious how to make it happen without selling everything you own on a whim, you're going to love this one. Let's get into it. Oh, I almost forgot. Quick favor to ask. If you're enjoying Armchair Expat, take a second to leave a review on Apple or Spotify or both. Once we hit 100 reviews on each of those platforms, I'm going to give away a $100 Amazon gift card to one lucky reviewer. All you have to do is leave a review, take a screenshot of your review, and enter at www.bargainhomesabroad.co/reviews. You can go to our website and you'll see the reviews under the podcast. Your feedback helps the show grow, and you might just win some shopping cash. You'll also see the terms and conditions on the website. Good luck, and thank you. Hello, Dawn and Matt. Welcome to the Armchair Expat podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just kind of dive right in. Tell us a little bit about your background and where you came from.
Sure. So we have lived for most of our life in the Bay Area, in the East Bay, San Francisco, that area. Matt's originally from Detroit. And when we became empty nesters, we decided that we were ready for an adventure. So we sold or gave away 90% of everything we owned and moved from 3,500 square foot house in the Bay Area to 600 square feet in New York City. It had always been our dream to live in New York City. And we had two dreams, actually. One was to live in New York City and the other was to live in Europe. And so we thought we'll live in New York City for 2 years and then we'll move to Europe. But we ended up not getting stuck because we loved New York so much. We decided to stay for about a decade. And then in 2023, we moved to Portugal and we live on the Silver Coast of Portugal.
Okay. So tell us how this came about. How did you make this move abroad possible?
You know, it's really interesting because we had, I think like a lot of people who follow you and see all the beautiful houses you post and you think, man, someday, wouldn't that be great? Just like someday. But it seemed so impossible, right? Because Matt was we were tied to New York City for Matt's job. And you just wonder like, how does that even work? How do you even move abroad? And something happened a couple years ago where obviously everybody went remote for the during the pandemic. But a couple years ago, we thought that we could be laid off from our jobs. And it was such a wake-up call because we thought we had really secure jobs. And, it was something that moving to Europe was something that we just kept putting off for someday. And then we realized we have to get really serious about this stage of life and really sitting down and thinking strategically about what it is that we want. And we knew we wanted three things. We wanted to live abroad. We wanted to continue to work, but do it remotely so that we could work wherever in the world we wanted. And we wanted to be able to travel. And we didn't want to pack all that travel into a couple of weeks a year. We wanted to be able to work and travel together. And so all of those things really led us to accelerate our plan to move to Europe. And of all the research that we did, Portugal just kept coming up as the top contender for a lot of reasons. And so that's why we made the move a couple of years ago.
I think one of the things that's interesting is, as terrible as the pandemic was for a lot of people in a lot of industries, it really, for us and for so many other people, made remote work a possibility for jobs that were not remote work jobs before. I mean, up until the pandemic, I was going to the office every day. And from the pandemic on, we got rid of the office and I've been working remotely. And the question was, well, if I can work remotely from around New York City, can I work remotely from somewhere other than New York City? The answer was, well, we certainly can. So it ended up being sort of we'll call it a positive outcome from the pandemic, just sort of the realization that there's more jobs that can be done more remotely than we thought.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So tell me a little bit more about kind of the process of when I know you landed on Portugal, but what were the other countries that were involved and kind of the factors that you thought about? And then ultimately, why did you choose Portugal to start with?
Well, we did consider Italy and France and Spain. Those were the other three that we were looking at. And there were a couple listen, any of those would be great places to land. And I still see homes on your page and think, oh, maybe we could make a move. But ultimately it kept coming back to Portugal for a couple of reasons. Number one is that you were eligible for citizenship in Portugal within 5 years. And once you have that citizenship, you can live and work anywhere in the Schengen countries. Some of the other countries, such as Italy and Spain, I think are the two, they were both 10 years. And we thought, well, we're not getting any younger, so we really want to be on a 5-year plan. But there were other factors too. We really wanted to live at the beach. We loved the climate in Portugal. Safety, I forget what the ranking is now, but it's like
5 or 6
in
terms of the safest countries. Yeah.
Safest countries in the world. And we just kept coming back to it. I think so much of this is just, where do you feel comfortable? Where do you see yourself? What feels like a fit when you're there? And we'd spent time in all of those countries, and Portugal just really felt like the right fit for us.
And that was one of my questions that came up as you were talking. So how much time did you spend in those other countries, and kind of as the process went on, like what did you really look for when you were kind of scouting in those countries?
Well, Spain and France and Italy, we had spent time in previously. So we felt like we kind of knew those countries already. So it was really getting familiar with Portugal. And so we came out here for a weekend and just to kind of see, is this somewhere that we could live? And we decided, yes. It was very fast. And then we came back and started looking for real estate. So it was, it happened pretty quickly, but we had done, I mean, a year of research online, and we had researched everything. And so we were trying to decide between the Silver Coast of Portugal and Madeira, both really great, very popular with expats. But we just really love it here on the Silver Coast, which is the stretch of coastline between Porto and Lisbon. And it's been just a great fit.
Nice. Okay. So tell me a little bit about kind of integrating into Portugal. What have been some of the harder things in the transition to moving there?
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, look, Portuguese is a language that we don't know. It's not like Spanish. If you're in the United States, you hear Spanish words a lot, or you hear French words a lot. You just don't hear Portuguese words a lot. So it's an entirely new language with sort of new practices. You've got a history in Portugal that you're just unfamiliar with. I think one of the things that is surprising is how much of Portuguese history is really incredible. However, depending on where you grew up, and certainly where we grew up, we never heard about Portuguese history other than, in the, Ponce de Leon, headed off to circumnavigate. And other than that, you really don't hear about Portuguese history at all. And so we were coming in as completely ignorant, I'll say that, of a lot of Portugal history. We had picked up information about the culture and things like that just from watching YouTube videos and from visiting. I think for us, though, some of the challenges are, again, language. We don't speak the language, or we're learning the language and it's just an unfamiliar language. Secondly, it is, I think one of the things that is positive and negative is in many places in Portugal, at least in many cities of size, there are expat groups.
Mhm.
And so you can join an expat group and you can get all kinds of great information and referrals, and you sort of feel like you've got a community, but it doesn't really help you integrate with the Portuguese life. You're just talking with other Americans, for the most part, other Americans in a place that isn't America, which isn't really the goal of moving to Europe. So I'd say those were some of them.
Yeah, I think also, when you grow up in any country, there's just things that never really occur to you to even think about until you move and you realize that it's very different. And so I think there's a lot of those kind of smaller things like, oh, that's different, or oh, that's different, or I didn't even know to ask about that. And so for us, one of the things we always tell people is be sure you talk to a tax professional extensively before you make the move, because that is one thing that fortunately we had some really good people around us and it made all the difference. But we talked to a lot of expats who kind of get hit sideways by some of the things that they didn't expect. But, just when you move to a new country and you don't know the language, you don't get to be smart and funny anymore. You're
Right.
just trying to figure out how to say hello, how are you, my name is. And I think that's an adjustment. As far as the language, a lot of people speak English here in Portugal, and we're fortunate for that, but we don't want to be the people who only rely on that. And so you have to be really willing to look dumb a lot as you kind of learn the culture, learn the language, and that is embarrassing at times. But I think that's one thing that was made Portugal such a win, is that people are so kind and so generous and so willing to help, and we never feel like people are being snooty or judgy or anything like that. It's a very, very kind culture, and so they've been very gracious with us, which we appreciate.
Right. And when you move to a new country, you're signing up for a challenge,
Yeah.
right? It's not like people accidentally fall into Portugal or any other foreign country as a new expat and are surprised that they're there. You're up for the challenge. And so, and it is challenging. You've got to have persistence. You've got to figure out a whole new set of rules and regulations and bureaucracy to get the stuff done that you need to get done, and practices and street signs and all these other things that are just part of the daily life of being in Portugal. But it's also part of our daily life when we were in the United States. We just had many, many years to sort of aggregate all that information. When you move to a new country, you're starting from scratch, and all those assumptions that you thought you had are just no longer apply.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like you're rewiring your brain, right? But when you're on autopilot for so long, you kind of notice the differences a lot.
And I think it's good for you. I think challenges like that are really good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell me a little bit about how you found your place in Portugal and what that kind of process was like? How is it different than finding something for the typical North American person?
So when we came, we actually bought a place, and we knew that we wanted an investment property because this was going to be a retirement plan, and so we wanted a home that also had an investment component. So we actually bought a property with 2 3-bedroom flats. And we rent the top one out. And so because we knew that that was the kind of property that we wanted, it narrowed things down pretty quickly, because these properties are pretty rare to find, not unheard of, but you just have to, it's a little bit of a needle in the haystack. We knew that we loved Nazaré, which is the town in Portugal that we live in. We came here first, we loved it here, and we got very, very, very lucky to find the exact property that we were looking for in the exact town we were looking in. And so the real estate process in terms of buying a property, well, there are some differences. There's no Zillow in Portugal. There's no, we have Idealista to look for homes, but there's nowhere to go and look for, recent comps, or you can't log on and see what your home is worth. And so all of that, and a different language, and frankly, a different culture around the home buying experience. That was something that we had to navigate, but it wasn't insurmountable. I wouldn't say that it was hard. There were just, things that we learned. but the process I think was pretty straightforward.
It is. It's not too outrageously different than buying a home in the United States. There are some differences in terms of the taxes that you pay, or just sort of little bits and pieces of the process. But generally speaking, it's very similar, especially if you're going through a bank to get a mortgage, which we did. And you've got a bank that wants to make it work. You've got a broker on the other side that wants to make it work. Your broker wants to make it work. And so they're helping you navigate the system. Obviously, they're looking out for their own interests, but you're looking out for your interests. But everybody wants to get the deal done, and they're very helpful in the process.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you found? Let's talk a little bit, I guess, about cost of living in comparison. Obviously, you were in two very, very expensive places in the United States, between San Francisco or Bay Area and New York City. So I would assume the cost of living is lower. But can you talk a little bit about kind of your daily expenses and your daily and monthly expenses, and how that kind of compares to that in the United States?
Yeah, well, so maybe we could start out with rent, since we talked about rent earlier. So in a 3-bedroom place here in Nazaré, would run probably somewhere in the ballpark of 1,000 euros, maybe 1,100 euros, maybe 1,200 euros. If it was a brand new luxury place, it could be 1,800 euros. But we're not talking about $3,000 or $4,000. We're talking about a modest amount. You could go in Lisbon as well if you wanted to be in a bigger town. And Lisbon obviously is the biggest city in Portugal. You could easily pay a couple of €1,000 for a place that would be like 1,100 euros here. So it does depend on exactly where you are. Mm-hmm. And look, if you wanted to spend 9,000 euros in Lisbon, you could, but obviously most people don't in the United States either. So, but it is, I'd say, the rent is pretty modest compared to, I'd say, a major city in the United States. In terms of other things, most other things that we experience are much less expensive. Dining out is probably half of what it costs us to dine out in the United States. Medical is so once you're a resident, you actually don't need to pay for medical insurance. There's state-run healthcare, so you actually get your health insurance, or you get your health coverage for free. Mm-hmm. You do have the option, and we took the option to buy private medical insurance, which basically just gives you access to more doctors and more hospitals. And we pay it's a little over $200 a month for each of us, and so that's a lot less expensive than what we were experiencing, obviously, in the United States. And the healthcare system here is very good. It's rated very highly. It's actually, in the services that rate these healthcare systems, rated very similar to the United States in terms of healthcare. So we think that's positive. Daily stuff, groceries, I'd say are probably, whether it's a third or a half less expensive, they're much less expensive. Things like, we're on a plan where we get our cable television, our internet, which is a top of the line internet here, 2 mobile phones with lots of capacity. And it's including all the taxes, something like 80 euros a month. So, I know that just for our internet in Connecticut, we still have an Airbnb in Connecticut. We're paying about $150 for just the internet side of things, let alone the television side of things or the phone side of things. So it's much less expensive here. So I could go on and on. I would say, in general, if you look at services like Expatistan or Numbeo, where you could compare cities or countries one to another, you'll see that Portugal tends to be about 40 to 50% of the cost of a major city in the United States.
Have you seen that? I know that kind of in the last, just looking at housing and housing prices on a almost daily basis, I have noticed kind of an uptick, obviously, as Portugal is getting more on the radar of North Americans specifically, that prices are climbing. Are you finding that as well? Or is it kind of like the stable kind of baseline living expenses are staying the same, but some other areas might be creeping up a little bit? Like
so the rents are staying pretty low, but to buy a home, those prices are really going up quite a bit. in Lisbon and Porto, obviously, but now that people are getting priced out of Lisbon, Porto, and the Algarve, they are coming to the Silver Coast, into Alentejo, and some like Braga, some places outside of Porto, and those are going up as well. Obviously, that's creating a lot of tension and a lot of problems for the Portuguese people, and I know that they are taking measures to keep it affordable for people who live here. But we've definitely seen real estate prices rise for sure.
Okay. Are there any expenses that you were kind of surprised that were a lot higher? I hear, like fuel maybe, and
Yeah. Well, so the expenses that end up being higher are really transportation related, right? So cars, to buy a car here, if you were to get, there aren't a ton of cars that are exactly the same here as in the United States. But if you were to buy, say, a Volkswagen Golf, which is also sold in the United States, it's about 10 or 15% more here in Portugal than it would be to get the exact same car in the United States. And so cars just tend to be more expensive. The other thing that's more expensive is fuel. So we pay, it's a per liter, but it ends up being roughly $6.50 to $7 a gallon for gasoline. And then the other thing that's part of driving is that there's, at least on mainland Portugal, there's quite a few toll roads. So, you'll end up spending even, 40 to, depending if we go down to the Algarve, to 100 euros a month just in tolls, where we were from. I guess, in New York, you cross bridges and you're paying a toll, but it feels like it's more here.
Yeah, it's funny because we talk about that. There's things that are less and things that are more, but overall, our cost of living, when you factor in everything, like what's more and what's less, we're in such a better position. The cost of living overall is so much lower here, which is an obnoxious thing to say for people who live here, and we're aware of that. But just coming from America, the medical expenses alone are so different. So, for example, I recently went in and had a bunch of tests. And I know that it would have been thousands of dollars, even with insurance in the US, and it was 34 euros to have it done here. And they were tests that probably wouldn't have even been done in the US. They were more, just ruling some things out. And so I think that just the peace of mind, especially as we get into some older years, that peace of mind that the medical costs are never going to come in. So many people, are forced into difficult situations because of medical debt, and just knowing that we will never face that. Also, property taxes are a lot lower.
Oh, yeah.
Insurance overall is lower, and so we've been really pleased with the cost of living overall. Just coming from the U.S. and some of the things, like you said, we do come from two of the most expensive areas in the U.S., so everything is relative. But I think even if we had come from other parts of the country, things like insurance and medical, those things really are a big difference.
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned driving. So, what are the particulars and the logistics around driver's licenses there? Like, can you still use your U.S. license, or do you have a certain amount of time before you have to get a Portuguese driver's license, or how does that work?
Yeah. So if you're under 60, you can use your U.S. driver's license until it expires. And at the time that license expires, you're supposed to then go through the process and convert it to a Portuguese license, which you can do. You fill out an application, you submit some documents, including a driving record from the state that you're from. You then have to go to an in-person meeting. They take your picture, they take a little bit of money, and that's it. It's very possible. Once you're over 60, you're supposed to change your driver's license within 90 days of taking residency here in Portugal. One of the other factors is that you need to have a medical doctor sign a sheet of paper that says that you're in decent enough shape to drive. So they do implement that for people. It's not just us, not just expats, for anybody who's over 60 who is getting a license, that they just need to have a doctor who does some sort of assessment as to whether somebody is capable of driving. So that's the process. It's just a process. It's not huge bureaucracy. It's just a thing you got to do.
Yeah. And so you don't have to retake any tests or anything like that. I mean,
Now, if you were to, yeah, if you were to be a resident and then wait longer than 2 years to change your license, 2 years after, let me say this: if you're over 60 and you wait longer than 2 years to convert your license, you will have to take a whole new test, and the test is in Portuguese. So you don't really want to do that.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, because I know Italy is very different too. You only have 1 year to convert, and it's all in Italian, and it's very difficult. Which, understandably, I get it. But so that seems a little bit kind of a barrier to entry is a little bit easier in Portugal
I think so. Yeah.
for most Americans. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about helping others move abroad. So I know there's a lot. Well, I expect this audience to be a lot of people that are kind of in the ideation phase or research phase of, really looking at all the alternatives to where they want to move and kind of going through, well, how can I make this happen? How can I set myself up for this? So let's talk a little bit about kind of your advice for people that might be in that phase, whether they work remote, maybe they don't work remote. Like what should they start thinking about if they really want to make that move, but they're just not sure where to start?
Well, I think that the key things are thinking about what are the most important things to you that you are looking for, right? And whether that's a certain kind of lifestyle, whether it's like for us, it was living at the beach, it was having weather that wasn't exceptionally hot or exceptionally cold. It was wanting to be able to easily travel to other parts of Europe. It was, having healthcare that was well priced and available and good. It was safety. So but you sort of have to think about what are the factors that you are trying to optimize, and get it down to 2 or 3 or 4 things that you're really going to say, these are the most important things. Once you are able to say that, you actually can much more easily start to eliminate countries. And once you end up focusing on 1 or 2 countries, you can then go visit those countries or do more research to then figure out which one makes most sense. And then even with those, like within Portugal, you could take those same criteria and decide, well, do I want to live in the north of Portugal? Do I want to live in Porto? Do I want to live in Lisbon? Do I want to live in Algarve? Do I want to live in one of these other places? What are the pros and cons of those things? Because you're trying to optimize for this set of things that you've decided, not arbitrarily, but sort of separately from the location. You've decided these are the things that I'm looking for. You try to find a place that is closest to that, and it's at least a starting point. We're not going to kid ourselves. A lot of people go into Portugal or move into a country in Europe or any other place, and the first place that they go, the first place that they rent, or the first place that they buy, maybe it's not right for them forever, but they're not having to make a forever decision. You're making a for now decision. And one of the things that we talk about is in my whole adult life, I've never lived in the same place for more than 5 years. Mm-hmm. So I still have yet to make a super long-term decision. But I think, I think really starting out by deciding what factors are the most important to you.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think a lot of people that we talk to are just like, how do I make this work? How do I get the remote job? How do I start the online business? Because a lot of the people that we talk to are specifically like 50 to 65. They're the people who are empty nesters, but not ready to retire. But they don't want to keep doing sort of the same grind. They want to keep working, but they're just wanting more freedom, more time freedom, more location freedom, more financial freedom, and more freedom around purpose. Like, what do I really want? What kind of contribution do I really want to be making in my professional life at this stage? And so we just talk to a lot of people about that. Like, what are you passionate about? What is the expertise that you have? Where do you see yourself? And really just helping people find that, because we talk to so many people who say, oh, I don't have anything to share, or my expertise doesn't translate, or something like that. But, our generation, I'm a Gen X, Matt's a boomer. But this generation, we don't have things like pensions for a lot of us that our parents had, and we don't have, the gold watch and some of those other things. But what we do have is a computer and an internet and a worldwide audience that we can reach with the things that we know and people who will pay us to learn what we know. And at this stage, the people that we really focus on, this 50 to 65, these are the people who are really asking what's next. And at this age, we all have so much life experience. We all have so much professional expertise, and a traditional market will just tell you, well, you're older, so your skills are not as valuable in the marketplace. And that's just not true. There's so many opportunities for people at this stage. And so that's really what we talk to people about is, where do you want to live? But how do I make that work? Because we talk to so many people who don't want to retire, but they still want to live abroad. They still want to travel. They still want that freedom. And I think that's the piece that we really help people focus on.
So tell me a little bit about your products and services then, and how you help people through what you're doing with Unretirees.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a Moving to Portugal course, but the focus of our work is really on expertise into income, which is how do I take what I know and turn that into consistent monthly income so I can decide where I work, what I do, how much I work, and just have that greater freedom. And that's going to look different for everybody. Some people want to work a couple of, hours a week. Some people are like, I still want to be in, a full-time kind of contributing role. But it's just a matter of helping people say, okay, here's the expertise. First of all, let's define the expertise. What lights you up? What do you want to talk about? What is it that that you feel like that just comes easily to you? And then what is it that people want to learn, and just kind of helping people build a business around that so that they can work from anywhere in the world. So they can see a home on your page and say, that's in Italy. I would love to live there. How do I make that work? And that's really the part that we focus on. There is so much opportunity at this stage, and retirement looks very different. Life after 50 looks very different for our generation than it has for our parents or our grandparents. And it's easy to get kind of caught up in fear mode. What is this going to look like? When actually there's so much opportunity, so much more opportunity. And I think we're just starting this generation, we're just starting to scratch the surface of what it means to reinvent what this stage of life really looks like.
Yeah, I so agree, and I'm in the camp, and I am your your target client right here. So, what would you say is kind of the typical runway of someone really kind of saying, "Oh, okay, I need to identify my expertise. I've had this, 20-year career in corporate America. I have no idea where I want to start." From kind of the ideation period all the way through kind of establishing a business or some kind of service. What does that look like? Like, what's the cycle of that?
So we have a 90-day business blueprint. And so our goal is to help people make their first $1,000 online within the first 90 days. Now, $1,000 may or may not be a life-changing amount of money, but what is life-changing is if you have never earned online before, what is life-changing is getting that first $1,000 and realizing I can do this. There are people who will pay for it, and just building on that from there. So that's really what we focus on, is just that first 90 days. Who's your audience? What's your product? What's your price point? How are you attracting buyers? How are you converting leads into sales? And what kind of product? Is it a coaching product? Is it a digital product? All of those things are things that we help people navigate so that they can go from I don't know where to start to look what I just did. So,
and for most people, they're able to do that before they ever actually move, right? They're sitting in the United States as wondering if this is even possible. They can go through this blueprint, and they can discover for a fact that, it's very likely, very possible for them to look at this being an opportunity for future income if they can't take their existing job and move remotely. And I think it's just then once they realize that they have a financial future that they can work with outside of having a 9-to-5 job that they currently have. And I think it opens up all kinds of doors in terms of relocation, but in terms of just how they're going to live their life.
Yeah. Even if you don't want to move abroad, which I know most of the people who are watching this do, and it is something that they're thinking about, Starting that when you are still working gives you the time, like you said, to have that runway so that if you do want to retire or you do want to make a change, or heaven forbid something happens in your job, that you already have something that you can just transition into that you can do for as long as you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I saw a stat the other day, and I'm terrible with numbers, so I'm not going to remember. But I mean, the amount of Americans with side gigs right now, it was astronomical.
Yeah.
And it really kind of goes to show that, this kind of offering and this kind of support for someone, like you said, whether they are moving abroad or not, it's something that we all need, right? Like if we're not in our, or if we're in a career that feels unfulfilling, or we know that there is more that we have to offer to the world, it's safer to start something on the side and see
Yeah.
how it goes than just kind of blowing up your entire life and deciding, I'm going to jump off this cliff and make it work. So I think
Yeah.
that's, kind of sound and sage advice to really kind of dip your toes in first, have a real strategic plan, and then leap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people that actually already took a leap or don't really have an alternative? Say, they have health issues or whatever, and they're kind of forced to leave their job, but then now they're like, okay, but I still have something to give to the world. What about those people? Where should they start?
I think that they still have expertise. So I would say still that expertise to income route. And it might not even be something that you're necessarily an expert at. It might be some of my favorite content is just, I'm going to go start a journey and I'm going to invite people along. Like I'm going to move abroad. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to invite people along. I'm going to launch a business. I'm going to, restart my life. There's some really popular content on YouTube right now from people who, I just got laid off and this is what I'm doing next. And so I think just focusing on the fact you don't have to be an expert, just something that you really want to talk about. And the kind of people that you want to connect with. Because when you put something like that out into the world, whether it's YouTube or a podcast or whatever it is, you're going to gather people around you who are passionate about the same thing. And, we started a YouTube channel almost a year ago, and the relationships that we have formed, the friendships that we have formed are so fulfilling because they're people that are on the same wavelength. And I think that, again, for this age group that we focus on, that community is so important. So how do I build that community? Where do I find that? And so I think that anybody can do this. If you have a computer or a phone and an internet, there is something that you can do to get started. And I know that we talk to a lot of people who are like, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. That's where we help. But everybody has something to offer. Everybody has something to that they can share to connect with other people and to build a business.
I think it's funny that it's easy to discount the knowledge and the expertise that you have in yourself because you just sort of think everybody knows how to do this. Everybody, it's just common knowledge. Everybody knows how to do these things.
Yeah.
Yet you have spent, years in a job learning stuff that is difficult to learn. You've spent years raising a family, perhaps, that's going through difficult things. You've spent plus you've got journeys that you've taken or are taking that are interesting and have challenges that people would be interested in seeing. I mean, I think that I think we end up, I'm not speaking just for myself. I think the common thing is we end up discounting our own uniqueness too often. And I think it's our uniqueness and our unique point of view and our unique history and the skills that we bring to the table that actually make us valuable.
So tell me a little bit about kind of your journey on YouTube and how you kind of are creators on YouTube, and you've built a community around that. So how has that looked?
Well, when we moved to Portugal, Matt came to me and he said, I want to do a YouTube channel. I want us to do a YouTube channel. And I said, I absolutely, under no circumstances, want to do a YouTube channel. But he said to me, you know what, this is really important to me. And he almost never says that. And I say that like 5 times before breakfast every day. So I figured I needed to get on board with this. And so we started the YouTube channel, and I just felt like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to really do this. So we're going to start an Instagram and a newsletter, and we're going to get monetized in the first 90 days, which thankfully we did. And I just really felt that, if we're going to do, I didn't want to just put something up on YouTube and wait around and see if somebody's going to watch it. That wasn't interesting. But also, the more that we did it, the more we understood that this was a mission that we felt really aligned with, which was just empowering people at this age to understand that you have more options than you've been told about what this stage of life can look like. And so since we launched it, we've had some hits and we've had some misses, and we're still figuring things out and learning as we go. But again, we've made some tremendous friendships, and it's been really fun. We're learning a lot. And like Matt said earlier, learning new stuff at any age is just a great thing. And we look forward to seeing that continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question for you around kind of your resistance to doing YouTube. And as you were talking back about kind of expertise and sharing it and just getting out there and sharing it with people, and you'll find an audience. As a relatively shy person, has a very hard time in front of the camera, and I'm sure I am not alone in this. How do you approach putting yourself out there? Like, what are some tips that you have for really just kind of getting over that hump of just not being afraid of being judged?
Well, that's such a good question. I was really at a point in my life where I had already done like putting myself out there. I'd run 2 online businesses before, and I really felt like I was ready to put my head in the sand, and just, close down all my social media accounts, which I think everybody's kind of tempted to do. But a couple of things. Number one, I will say that my fears about, the comment section of the YouTube videos, which was probably, my biggest fear, were not as bad as I thought they were going to be. We have a really supportive and wonderful community. And if we hadn't started the YouTube channel, we wouldn't have ever met them. But I think also the other thing I try to stay super focused on is that it's just about giving value. So how can I serve someone? What do they need? What can I provide? And I think the more that we really focus on our audience and meeting their needs and helping them get what they want, then it becomes less about feeling nervous in front of the camera. And I'm probably still a little uncomfortable with it, but sometimes you just have to keep showing up and keep doing it. And then you meet your tribe, and they're there with you every week, and they're leaving comments and cheering you on. And it's a deeply satisfying experience.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think the real message is find your purpose, find the people that you want to serve, and it all comes kind of naturally from there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You do get your trolling comments every once in a while, and you can decide to either delete them or have fun with them, or just say thanks for watching and move on, which is what we normally do.
Yeah, that's unavoidable on the internet. And I heard someone, and I can't give credit to who it was, but someone called them the engagement fairies. So they were like, "Thank you, engagement fairies, because you're feeding the algorithm for me and my."
That's exactly right.
I love that.
Yeah. So let's go back to what is one surprising thing that you miss about the United States?
Well, can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
So I think for me, there's just this sense of familiarity, and I could, and that's a broad statement, but when you are, when you live in the United States and you've lived there all your life, there's just a familiarity. There's familiarity with politics and with the news and with the patterns and with sports teams and with, there's so many things that are just sort of part of, we'll call it American culture, that you just think are normal life. Mm-hmm. And when you move to a new place, everything is so unfamiliar. Yeah. And I think, and it's not bad, it's just new, and you're challenging yourself to get familiar with all of these brand new things. But there are some times where it's like, I sort of miss sort of feeling like I knew what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could not tell you what's going on in what's going on in politics in Portugal, or in even to a large degree, even for the news in Portugal. But there's that familiarity that I think I do miss sometimes.
Yeah, we do get some of the news. We have a couple of resources that we get to, but it's certainly not the same as the US, where we understand, why Fox News is different than CNN, and, sort of all the different pieces and the nuances and things like that. So I would have to say that for me, there's, other than family, of course, I don't know that there's really a lot that I miss about the US. And we didn't leave the US because we were mad. We didn't leave the US because, we were unhappy with anything. This was an adventure that we had planned on taking for a long time. So this was just part of our story. But even leaving without that kind of, we weren't running away from something. But even with all of that said, there really isn't a lot about the US that I think I miss on a regular basis. Yeah.
What kind of advice do you have for people that are considering this move? What would you tell them?
I think, and I think Matt touched on this earlier, is just to run to something and not to run from something, because there are problems with every country. There are pros and cons in every country. And I think just to have a really clear vision of what you want your life to be and to run towards that. Because we find that expats who move to Portugal because they have run from something, not just in Portugal, but any of the expats that we talk to, we find that those are typically the ones that have the biggest struggle. And so just to get a really, really clear vision of what the life is that you want to build and create in the place you're going to.
I think that's great. And I think the other thing is, once you've decided that you want to make a move, it's going to feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right? There are 100 detailed things that you need to do over a window of time in order to make the move. But honestly, none of them are huge. There's just a lot of little steps. And so you just start biting off the little step after step after step. And with some diligence, before you know it, you find yourself at a meeting with the Portuguese consulate and getting your visa stamped, and suddenly you're here, So it is, it's a drawn out process, but it certainly is one that can be known, and it's one that you can do without a lawyer. You can do it by yourself. We did it by ourselves without having a professional involved. And that was really thanks to a Facebook group called Americans and Friends PT, which actually is a useful group for anybody who is considering moving to Portugal. But chances are, any country that somebody is considering, there's probably a Facebook group of Americans who have made that move, who can provide advice. And certainly this Facebook group, Americans and Friends PT, they have documents around the entire process of getting your visa, exchanging your driver's license, all of these other things, which make it much more clear, and you feel much more confident about what you need to do in order to move here, move your pet here, get your license here, do all those other things that you need to do.
Okay. And on that note, if people want to work with you, how do they find you?
Absolutely. So we are everywhere at the Unretirees, our website, our YouTube, our Instagram, our newsletter. People can get in touch with us anywhere. Probably the best place to start is our YouTube channel, where we've got lots of content about moving to Portugal and building flexible income streams after 50.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time. This was a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad you got to join me. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And that's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening and spending some time with us. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Make sure to follow the show and leave a review. It will really help others find us. And if you're dreaming about a life abroad or already living it, I'd love to hear from you. You can connect with me on Instagram at bargainhomesabroad, or on our website, www.bargainhomesabroad.co. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and I'll see you back in the armchair soon. Bye-bye.